On October 13, 1972, a plane carrying the Uruguayan Old Christians rugby team crashed in the remote Andes Mountains. The flight, which was supposed to be a routine trip to Chile for a friendly match, turned into a nightmare that would test the limits of human endurance and willpower. The world watched in horror as the news broke. Families and friends of the passengers were gripped by fear and uncertainty, glued to their televisions and radios, hoping for any sign of good news. 45 passengers, mostly young men with their lives ahead of them, were now stranded in one of the most unforgiving environments on Earth. These were athletes, full of vigor and dreams, now facing a stark and brutal reality. Their plane, a Fairchild FH-27D chartered for a match in Chile, had gone off course due to severe weather. The pilots struggled to navigate through the dense clouds and turbulent winds, unaware that they were veering dangerously off their intended path. It clipped a mountain peak, sending it tumbling down a glacier. The impact was devastating. The force of the collision tore the plane apart, and the once hopeful journey turned into a scene of chaos and destruction. The fuselage split open, scattering debris across the snow and ice. Personal belongings, pieces of the aircraft, and remnants of the passengers' lives were strewn across the frozen landscape. For those who survived the initial impact, a new fight for survival had just begun. They were faced with injuries, the loss of friends and teammates, and the harsh elements of the Andes. The crash site was a scene of chaos and despair. The survivors had to quickly come to terms with their situation, tending to the wounded and trying to salvage whatever they could from the wreckage. Wreckage was strewn across the mountainside. The once intact aircraft was now a twisted mass of metal and shattered dreams. Bodies lay amidst the twisted metal and broken seats. The sight was harrowing, a stark reminder of the fragility of life. The survivors, many injured and in shock, huddled together for warmth. They shared body heat, using whatever they could find to shield themselves from the biting cold. They were at an altitude of over 11,800 feet, surrounded by towering peaks and a vast expanse of snow and ice. The isolation was profound, and the realization of their predicament began to sink in. The freezing temperatures, thin air, and the threat of avalanches were their new reality. Each day was a battle against the elements, and each night brought new challenges. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the crash site, the survivors retreated into what remained of the fuselage. The cold became even more intense as darkness fell, and the fuselage offered a meager shelter from the biting wind and plummeting temperatures. It offered a meager shelter from the biting wind and plummeting temperatures. They used parts of the wreckage to create makeshift barriers, trying to insulate themselves as best as they could. The reality of their situation settled in. They were stranded in a frozen wasteland, with limited resources and no immediate hope of rescue. They were alone, injured, and stranded in a frozen wasteland. The psychological toll was immense as they grappled with the loss of their friends and the uncertainty of their own fate. Their chances of being found were slim. The vastness of the Andes and the harsh weather conditions made search and rescue efforts incredibly difficult. The world above believed them to be dead. News reports began to shift from hopeful to somber as the likelihood of finding survivors diminished with each passing day. After 10 days, the search for the missing plane was called off. The families and friends of the passengers were left in mourning, believing their loved ones were lost forever. Unbeknownst to the outside world, a small group of souls clung to life in the heart of the Andes. They refused to give up, drawing strength from each other and the hope that they might still be rescued. Their story, however, was far from over. The days turned into weeks, and the survivors faced unimaginable hardships, but their determination never wavered. This was just the beginning of their extraordinary fight for survival, a testament to the strength of the human spirit. Their journey would become one of the most remarkable tales of endurance and resilience, inspiring generations to come. The immediate aftermath of the crash was a blur of activity and despair. The once serene landscape was now a chaotic scene of twisted metal and scattered belongings, a stark contrast to the tranquility that had existed moments before. Survivors tended to the wounded, their efforts hampered by the lack of medical supplies and the freezing temperatures. Makeshift bandages were fashioned from torn clothing, and the cold air stung their exposed skin, making every movement a painful reminder of their dire situation. Food and water were scarce, limited to the meager contents of the plane's galley. The survivors scoured the wreckage, hoping to find anything that could sustain them, but their search yielded little more than a few packets of crackers and some bottles of water. They rationed what little they had, knowing that help was nowhere in sight. Each morsel of food was carefully divided, and every drop of water was savored, as they clung to the hope that rescue would come before their supplies ran out. Survivor 1, the Andes, beautiful yet unforgiving, held us captive in an icy embrace. The majestic peaks that surrounded us were both awe-inspiring and terrifying, a constant reminder of the isolation and danger we faced. The thin air made every breath a struggle. At such high altitudes, oxygen was scarce, and the survivors found themselves gasping for air, their lungs burning with the effort to draw in enough to sustain them. The bitter cold, often dropping to 40 degrees below zero at night, threatened to extinguish the flickering flame of life. Frostbite became a constant threat, and the survivors huddled together, sharing body heat in a desperate attempt to stave off the freezing temperatures. They huddled together inside the shattered fuselage, their bodies pressed together for warmth, their spirits slowly sinking under the weight of their predicament. The nights were long and filled with the sounds of shivering and whispered prayers for survival. Food, or the lack thereof, quickly became a pressing concern. The initial rations dwindled rapidly, and the survivors were forced to confront the harsh reality that they would need to find alternative sources of sustenance if they were to survive. The small amount of chocolate, wine, and cheese they salvaged from the wreckage wouldn't last long. Each bite was a bittersweet reminder of the comforts they had lost and the uncertainty of their future. Hunger gnawed at their stomachs, a constant reminder of their desperate situation. The pangs of hunger grew more intense with each passing day, and the survivors knew that they would need to make difficult decisions to stay alive. Survivor 1. As days turned into nights, the stark reality of our isolation became apparent. The vast expanse of snow and ice stretched out in every direction, and the silence was broken only by the howling wind and the occasional cry of a fellow survivor. We were on our own, our fate hanging by a thread in this unforgiving landscape. The realization that no one knew where we were, and that rescue might never come, weighed heavily on our minds. Survival, we realized, would require more than just physical strength. It would demand mental resilience, the ability to stay focused and determined in the face of overwhelming odds. It would demand an indomitable spirit, a collective will to live. The survivors drew on their inner reserves of strength, finding ways to motivate each other and keep their spirits up, even in the darkest moments. They drew strength from each other, finding solace in shared stories, songs, and prayers. The bonds that formed in those desperate days were unbreakable, forged in the crucible of their shared struggle. The bond forged in the face of adversity would prove to be their greatest asset. It was this sense of solidarity, this unyielding commitment to one another, that would ultimately see them through the darkest days of their ordeal. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The survivors clung to life, their bodies growing weaker, their hopes dwindling with each passing hour. Each day was a battle against the elements, a test of their endurance and willpower. The initial shock gave way to a chilling reality. The gravity of their situation became more apparent with each passing day. They were on their own, forgotten by the world, left to face their mortality in the icy wilderness. The vast, unending expanse of snow and ice seemed to mock their plight. Survivor 2, the transistor radio salvaged from the wreckage, became our lifeline to the outside world. It was our only connection to civilization, a fragile thread of hope. We listened intently for news of the search efforts, our hearts pounding with a mixture of hope and dread. Each crackle of static held the promise of salvation or the despair of abandonment. Then, the devastating news came. It was a blow that shattered our fragile hopes. After 10 days, the search for the missing plane and its passengers was called off. The world had given up on us. We were officially declared dead. The weight of that declaration was almost too much to bear. Despair threatened to consume them. The cold, the hunger, the isolation, it all seemed insurmountable. The knowledge that they were alone, presumed dead and forgotten, was a heavy burden to bear. It was a darkness that seeped into their souls. Yet amidst the despair, a flicker of defiance ignited within them, a spark that refused to be extinguished. They refused to accept their fate. They would not be defeated by the wilderness. They would not die here, not without a fight. They began to plan, to strategize, to find ways to survive against all odds. Survivor 2. Our will to live was fueled by the memory of our loved ones, by the faces of those we longed to see again, by the thought of seeing our families again. It was this hope that kept us going, that gave us the strength to endure. We knew that somewhere beyond the towering peaks and endless snow, life went on. The world continued to turn, and we wanted to be a part of it again. And we were determined to be a part of it again. This resolve became our anchor, our guiding star in the darkest of nights. This determination, this unwavering belief in their own survival, would become their guiding light in the darkest of times. It was a beacon that led them through the storm, a promise of a future beyond the wilderness. They worked together, pooling their resources and skills to build a shelter, to find food, to stay warm. Each small victory was a testament to their resilience. Around a small fire, they shared stories and memories, keeping the flame of hope alive. These moments of connection were a lifeline, a reminder of their humanity. As they looked out over the vast, snowy landscape, they knew the road ahead would be long and arduous, but they were ready to face it, together. With determination in their hearts and the memory of their loved ones as their guide, they set out on a journey to find help. They would not be forgotten. They would survive. Their footprints in the snow were a testament to their resolve, a path leading towards hope, towards life. They would reclaim their lives no matter the cost.